Israel and Hamas have agreed on a ceasefire deal, which will take effect on Sunday, the 19th of January. And that's just a day before the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump takes office. Latest information from Tel Aviv says the Israeli cabinet, but several opinions are raising around the agreement, which analysts say could face some hitches due to divided interest. We have a report.
The Hamas-run civil defense agency says at least 71 persons have been killed in airstrikes in Gaza amid negotiations on a mutually acceptable ceasefire deal. The killed reportedly include more than 19 children and 24 women. The Israeli military has not yet commented. An Israeli cabinet meeting to approve the ceasefire agreement is being delayed by an allegation made by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who says Hamas is seeking last-minute concessions. A Hamas spokesperson has rejected Mr. Netanyahu's suggestion, claiming the group remains committed to the deal. Full details of the deal have not been released, but it includes a ceasefire in Gaza, the phased withdrawal of Israeli forces, and the release of hostages held in Gaza. The President of the United States, Joe Biden, announced the ceasefire agreement Wednesday.
The deal is structured in 3 phases. Phase 1 will last 6 weeks. It includes a full and complete ceasefire, withdrawal of Israeli forces from all the populated areas of Gaza, and the release of a number of hostages held by Hamas, including women and elderly and the wounded. And I'm proud to say Americans will be part of that hostage release in Phase 1 as well. And the Vice President and I cannot wait to welcome them home. In exchange, Israel released hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. And during Phase 1, the Palestinians can also return to their neighborhoods. You know, during the next 6 weeks, Israel will negotiate the necessary arrangements to get Phase 2, which is a permanent end of the war. Let me say it again, a permanent end of the war.
Israel chiefly wants hostages held by Hamas released, while Hamas also wants persons held hostage on its side released, especially two former Hamas military commanders in the West Bank who are in Israeli prison. But the release are to be in phases. Israel is also to pull out its troops from the Philadelphia corridor within 42 days of the ceasefire deal. If all terms of the deal are approved by the Israeli parliament, the execution will begin.
And the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has welcomed the announcement of a deal to secure a ceasefire and hostage release in Gaza. He's asking relevant parties to uphold their commitments and ensure that the deal is fully implemented. Mr. Guterres maintains priority must be to ease the tremendous suffering caused by the conflict, and the United Nations stands ready to support the implementation of the deal and scale up the delivery of sustained humanitarian relief material.
I welcome the announcement of a deal to secure a ceasefire and hostage release in Gaza. I commend the mediators, Egypt, Qatar and the United States of America, for their dedicated efforts in brokering this deal. Their unwavering commitment to finding a diplomatic solution has been critical in achieving this breakthrough. I call on all relevant parties to uphold their commitments and ensure that this deal is fully implemented. From the outset of the violence, I've called for an immediate ceasefire and the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages.
And for more on this ceasefire of high international interest, I am now being joined by an international law expert, Livingstone Weche, who joins me from Nigeria's Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. Good to have you join us.
Thank you, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We understand that this ceasefire will begin on Sunday, or is set to begin on Sunday. But I wanted to ask, because we know that fighting is still ongoing, could anything go wrong just before Sunday?
Yeah, well, you know, you're dealing with a very, what you can best describe as a hydra-headed situation that has generated so much controversy, and there is a very deep-seated trust issue. There is a deep-seated trust deficit between the warring parties, and this, by implication, may hamper the ceasefire process, because as long as that trust factor has not been properly developed, it becomes worrisome whether the planned ceasefire will achieve ultimate success, because this war already has a history. Remember that the last ceasefire was sometimes in November of 2023, where Hamas released about 105 hostages, and Israel released about 240-something number of hostages, and that lasted for about a week. And ever since, negotiation has continued. Mediators have done all their bits, but in this particular case, we are hoping, in the interest of humanitarianism, that this particular development should be successful, because lives have been lost in too many numbers, incalculable losses. There is no reason under the heavens why human beings should not sit back and think as human beings, because properties are being destroyed, humans have been lost in a manner that has become incalculable. So the point here is that the international community or development partners and interested stakeholders around the world should put out their trust on the table and ensure that they are not midwifing this process with a sense of bias, but they must do so giving Israel and Hamas the complete assurance that whatever interest there be, that those interests will be properly addressed. There must be no room for doubts, because if there is doubt, remember, Israel is the only Jewish state on earth, and they will do everything, you know, in their powers to protect that territory. There are government officials who have vowed to resign. Before this time, some have resigned when Netanyahu planned to consider a ceasefire. And much as this ceasefire plan is on the table, we are hoping that the Israeli cabinet will vote affirmatively to pave way for this ceasefire. And that
hold on, Livingston, if you can let me just come in here. You mentioned Israeli cabinet. We know that they are yet to even vote on that agreement. That's another issue, another sticking point in this conversation. But I wanted to stay on something you raised earlier, which I found very interesting, when you mentioned that this war has been on for a really long time, and we're not even talking about this particular war. The conflict between Israel and Hamas has been on for a really long time, and this is just a ceasefire agreement, not a peace plan. And I just wanted to get your thought on that, why the focus is so much on getting a ceasefire, but not necessarily a peace plan.
Well, a ceasefire, because the issue of humanitarian aid is of the essence here. There was a plan, a peace plan that proposed a two-state solution to the issue. But it now beggars whether Israel is even of that view any longer, because after the ceasefire and possible evacuation of Israeli troops and Hamas troops shifting back from the Gaza Strip, who governs the territory? Because the war has a historical foundation, as well as being one of the world's most celebrated infamous conflicts. I use the word infamous because lives are being lost in countless magnitude. So on that note, it may be difficult to ascertain sustainable peace as long as Israel's view is that Hamas must be entirely decimated from Gaza and that Gaza must be completely governed by Israel, which view I doubt whether Palestinians may accept, which view Saudi Arabia and Qatar and other Arab neighbors have said that for there to be an involvement of the Arab states in sustainable peace in Gaza, that particular territory, particularly Palestine, must be given its full state status, which opinion Israel holds to the contrary. So these are issues that must be nipped, and proper negotiations must be put up to avoid this development just tilting the apple cart. Because if you fail to see the devil in all of these details, you may have a surprise relaunch of this same conflict while you're counting your 6 weeks plan for a ceasefire. It becomes a work in futility. So these matters should be deeply and critically considered while the ceasefire is being implemented, if at all it will be sustained, because there is still doubt. The Israeli territory, the Israeli government has its own stance, which is absolute decimation of Hamas. So if these issues are not addressed, then it may end up becoming a work in futility, because Israel's position has remained that Hamas must be out of the way, completely decimated. Palestinians believes that they should remain and that the territory belongs to them, as well as consideration of their states' recognition of full states status, as it were. So it's a very difficult,
a very tricky one as well.
Very tricky one, and the international community is currently working on eggshells on this issue.
There are far-right members of the Israeli cabinet who are, sort of not into this agreement. Hamas wants some prisoners to be released. That's the new detail we're getting. Just a lot, going on. But we'll see how this plays out. Always a pleasure to have you on. International Affairs Analyst Livingston Uche.